Today, we're going to jump into a really fascinating idea from Friedrich Nietzsche, pulled right from his book, The Gay Science. It's this thought that distance, distance, is what actually creates beauty and perfection. It's a pretty wild concept that explains why we tend to idealize the people and things we admire from afar.
So, this all boils down to one central question, and it's a big one. Why do we fall in love with appearances? You know, the surface of things. Nietzsche's take is that this isn't some kind of character flaw. Nope, it's actually a fundamental part of how our minds work and how we make sense of the world.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the basic allure of distance itself. Then, we'll get into what Nietzsche calls our mind's noble illusion. We'll explore what happens when we get a little too close for comfort, and how this whole idea applies to big concepts like idols, virtue, and even God. After that, we'll see why we might actually need these illusions, and finally, how to turn all of this into an art of perspective.
Okay, let's dive right in with the core idea. In a part of The Gay Science that he actually titled Out of the Distance, Nietzsche basically asks us to just stop and think about how much our view of something changes based on how far away we are from it.
Think about it. When you're looking at something from far away, your mind just naturally smooths out all the rough edges. It doesn't get bogged down in the messy details. Instead, what you perceive is this perfect, polished, idealized version. You see?
Things like dignity and grace and this almost dreamlike perfection. But here's the kicker. Nietzsche says those qualities aren't really in the thing you're looking at. Nope. They're projected by your mind, which is acting like a filter, screening out all the imperfections you're just too far away to see. But of course, what happens when you start to walk closer? That whole perspective just shifts dramatically. The beautiful illusion starts to kind of pixelate and dissolve, and suddenly you're face to face with the raw, unfiltered reality. Up close, we see all the hard work, the laborious efforts. We see the biological necessities, the sweat and the grime. All the common everyday struggles. It's the stuff that distance so conveniently hides. You know, the beautiful, graceful dancer you see from the back of the theater becomes a person with aching muscles and sore feet when you're standing right next to them.
So, okay, why do our minds do this? This isn't just about tricking ourselves. Nietzsche actually saw it as something much, much grander. He gives it a very specific name in The Gay Science. He calls it a noble illusion. I love that phrase. It's this perfect image, this beautiful mirage that our mind actively constructs. And it's noble because, for us, it actually serves a higher, more important purpose.
So why do we bother creating them? Well, first off, we just have this deep human craving for things to be beautiful and perfect. Second, it helps us avoid what Nietzsche called the intellectual poverty of a world that's just raw facts with no magic or mystery. And finally, and this is a big one, it gives us a reason, a why, for our admiration, for our passion. We want to believe in something heroic, something divine.
And this, of course, creates a massive problem. There's this paradoxical feeling of disgust that can wash over you when that comfortable, illusion-creating distance suddenly collapses.
Nietzsche absolutely nails this feeling of disillusionment with his famous phrase, human all too human. It's that sinking feeling you get when you realize your hero, your idol, that person you put on a pedestal, is just a person, with all the messy, mundane stuff that comes with it.
Getting too close is exactly like seeing the machinery behind the curtain. The magic just evaporates. You see all the unglamorous gears and levers, the effort, the totally ordinary parts that are required to sustain that magnificent image you once admired from so far away.
And what do we find behind that curtain? Well, physical needs. Hunger, exhaustion. We find personal vanities, little insecurities, and what Nietzsche called atavistic drives, our most primitive, basic instincts. All the stuff that completely shatters that perfect, noble image.
Now, get this. Nietzsche takes this idea, and he blows it up. He argues that this doesn't just apply to people we admire. He expands this whole concept to cover our deepest, most abstract ideas.
You can see a clear progression. We start by idealizing a person, but then we take a step back and we idealize a virtue, concepts like justice or duty. We treat them as perfect and unconditional. Why? Because they're abstract, they're distant from the messy reality of applying them. And the final step, of course, is idealizing a god, the ultimate, distant, perfect, unknowable being.
And here is the ultimate punchline for Nietzsche. The death of God is the ultimate example of closing that distance. It's the moment humanity finally gets close enough to its highest ideal to see the fingerprints all over it, to realize its all too human origins. The distance is gone, and so is the magic.
But wait, here comes the twist. You'd think that these illusions are bad, right? That truth, cold hard truth, is all that should matter? Well, Nietzsche says, not so fast. He argues these beautiful illusions are not just nice to have, they are absolutely necessary. He basically lays out two paths. On one hand, you have the honest seeker. This person demands unconditional truth at all costs. But in the process, they destroy all the beauty, leaving themselves in a world of, well, shriveled facts. But on the other hand, you have the noble spirit, who learns to live in that tension, to navigate between the useful illusion and the cold, hard fact. Because, as Nietzsche puts it, distance provides the very oxygen that allows our spirit to breathe. Without it, we would just suffocate in a world of raw, unfiltered reality. These illusions aren't just comforting lies. They're a survival tactic, a way to create noble myths that keep us striving and moving forward.
So what do we do with all this? Well, this is where this entire philosophy becomes a practical skill. It becomes a genuine art of living.
And that is the absolute core of what Nietzsche meant by the gay science. It's not a science of facts and figures, it's an art. It's the art of balancing our intellectual conscience, that drive we have for the truth, with our heart's deep fundamental need for beauty, for myth, for a little bit of illusion.
So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that the great challenge of life is to become a master of perspective. It's about developing the wisdom to know when to stand back and just admire the beautiful illusion, and when it's time to step forward and engage with that messy, human, all too human reality. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to ask ourselves. Which beautiful illusions, which necessary distances are you preserving in your own life, just to keep your spirit breathing?